Journaling has been one of the most productive use of my time in terms of processing things, solving problems, getting creative, managing stress, and also being able to develop and maintain clear thinking. And in this video, I'm going to go over exactly the different facets and areas of your life, how exactly journaling impacts your productivity, your mental health, your ability to think clearly, and of course, what I just said, just manage stress and things of that nature. It has always been one of those things at my disposal where if we're constantly just always in our heads, things don't necessarily get done. So it's one of those tools where you can actually use physiology and also externalize your thinking onto something tangible versus just keeping it always in your head. Because whenever there's a saying, whenever you are always in your head, it's best to do some sort of movement or do something where it takes it out of you. For instance, this is why I have like this huge habit of always journaling and working with my note system and things of that nature. So I'm crystallizing my thoughts, I'm thinking through things. And this is why you find authors, people who write a lot, people who code, people who somehow crystallize their thinking through some sort of tangible medium, like writing, like I just said, producing books, or even to people who are like just speaking in front of the camera, because you're actually processing all the things that are marinating, going into your subconscious, and just like your subconscious mind is working it in its background, processing it, wrangling through the different inputs you're working with, and then eventually creates some sort of solution from it. It fires different synaptic connections, and then you're producing different sorts of insights, gaining new perspectives, and also just enriching your mindset. Now, really quick, before we get into the meat of the video, it's kind of nerdy, but it's also important to understand the etymology of basically productivity. So productivity, the word, it stems from two words from what I've researched online, and one has to do with productus. I believe it is a Latin origin, and of that, what it means is to bring forward something. You're bringing forward something, all right? And the second part is ivity, which is a state or quality of something. So when we associate the two words and use the word productivity, it's a state of quality of being able to produce something. And in this case, when you want to be extremely productive in whatever you're doing, right? In this case, being able to journal, to solve problems, be more creative, crystallize your thinking, and maybe formulate new hypotheses and insights and stuff like that. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a state or quality to bring forth that is what already in you. So the very first area I want to speak on is how it improves just mental clarity and also your ability to achieve goals. So one of the most useful tools you can use journaling as or writing is just for a simple dump, because when everything is just being held in your head, you're accumulating this thing called cognitive load. There's too many things you're worrying about, the people that are pissing you off, the bills you have to pay, the problems you have to solve, all the things that are going on in your life, the things you have to process through. You have to unload that through somewhere. That's why we have phones. That's why we have like these journal systems and stuff like that, because they're extensions of our brain. And there's actually this theory, I believe it's called the extended mind theory. But what that works is that we're using these tools, this technology and stuff like that to become extensions of us. Like try going out anywhere right now without a phone. It feels a little weird because in a way we're cyborgs. And this is the same thing with writing and stuff like that. You can use, whether it's on paper, whether it's through writing on the computer or whatever it may be, as an extension of yourself to unload all these things going up in your mind, right? To unload it and then free it up for something else. So it's like clearing up your computer or something like that and reducing, like let's say your brain right now can only carry about 16 gigabytes of RAM. When you're offloading it, you can now, rather than being 16 out of 16 full, right? You can now actually have a lot of memory to work and process different things in the background or even consciously. And by this, it could be like, so rather than being completely full, you can't process all these other things going on in your life. Now you can actually process many things because now you have 1 gigabyte of RAM being used versus 16 before. Another one is kind of obvious, but actually prioritizing and breaking down your goals rather than just creating everything in your head. It is good to just have somewhere a piece of paper, or even you put it into your computer or whatever it may be that you're storing your goals. You're actually thinking through and processing all the things, why you're trying to solve them, why you're trying to achieve them. So you're actually working out your thoughts. Like one powerful insight I got from my life is I like to reflect a lot on my goals and what I want to do with my life and stuff like that. But when you're always just thinking it, sure, it can be cool, whether it's because society has programmed you to like it or think it's important, or because maybe you think this is something you want. But realistically, when you're journaling through problems and goals and things that you want in your life, it actually helps you develop an understanding and really just connect to this deep inner part of self, whether it is something you really want, and if so, how can you go about it? You can't really do this all in your head. Like, sure, you can think about it, but you're just gonna get too stuck up in your head. You're gonna get overinflated, and it's just gonna become a constant mess of overwhelm. Whereas if you're writing and you're actually processing it on paper or whatever it may be, you're actually learning how to think, to crystallize your thinking, to form some sort of reasoning behind why it is that you want to pursue these things, and if so, in what kind of order. Another very obvious one is for reflection and being able to optimize your life. So it kind of goes back to like what we were just talking about with the whole goal setting thing. But the reason why you want to have like sacred time to reflect and be able to process things, optimize things, is because you need this non-time. I believe I talked about it in one of my prior videos, but this non-time where you're not always just focusing on a doing, and you're not always focusing on the minute minutia of all the little things going on in your life, whether it's chores, it's meeting with people, talking to people, like all these things, like all this noise. You need this sort of blank space, right? Like this sort of non-time where you're able to just process, think through things, sit through things, being able to go out on a walk, being able to go out and break. It's that one little thing that's like the massive difference in terms of you understanding something and not, right? Just having that extra little space. And simply by just writing it, like I know I'm kind of like repeating myself, but you're really crystallizing your thoughts. You're really putting things onto something tangible. You're understanding it better. You're working through it, and overall, you develop a better perspective around anything you're trying to work through at the moment. Especially too if you're doing this like right before you're going to sleep, because you have this whole entire day. You've done a lot of things, and sometimes you could just be really in trenches with everything you're doing. And if you don't have some sort of secret time just to process things, how the day went, what have you accomplished today? Did it even make sense to accomplish these things? It can basically course correct your goals, right? Whether you're working on the right things. Like imagine for a whole entire year working on the wrong things, and it's only because you've always just been in the grinds of doing something and not actually stepping back, reflecting on it, and then fixing your course, your direction, wherever you're going. It also even comes down to the questions we're asking as we're writing, as we're journaling. Like for instance, if you have this one mapped out plan, right, and you don't have like the proper frameworks, you're not actually using them, like these other different tools for writing and stuff like that. For instance, if you're trying to achieve a goal and you think you have to take this long way out, right? But what if you just simply, during your reflection, you had this time because prior you didn't. You instead asked yourself, how can I achieve XYZ goal in 1/10 of the time or the half the time? You would start thinking differently because now you're actually applying a framework or something to your reflection through journaling, through this ability to crystallize and formulate your thinking. Whereas prior is just all in your head, like you have all these thoughts everywhere and it's not just organized. This is just organized thinking. You're bringing things into order. And then of course comes problem solving and then being able to be very creative with it. Now, again, you're processing through all this information. You're writing it down. You're working the different perspectives, different ways of seeing the problem. And overall, writing, what it ultimately does is just clarifies your thoughts, helps you lead yourself to more solutions. I wrote in one of my former newsletters, one of the posts I made, and it was one way I use a creative way to problem solve, and that is leveraging Solomon's paradox. And what that talks about is that there's this paradox that King Solomon, one of the wisest and richest men in history during the biblical era, while he was wise and rich, he would also be a walking contradiction because he wouldn't really follow his advice. He had many wives and like all these different things. So the way I use it for myself is because since I'm the only one that knows myself the best, since I have all the context, I understand myself the best, it's like I prescribe myself my own advice. I speak to like a higher version of myself. And then from that self, I can bounce back and forth conversations. And I've started doing this like maybe 3 years ago or something around then, right? And when you're able to do this, because we prescribe advice to others when people come to us objectively. So when you're bouncing back and forth these ideas with your highest self, it's like you're talking to a therapist or someone outside of you versus just trying to wrangle it in your head. Now, I'm not saying don't go to a therapist or anything like that. I'm just saying this is one way you can process information and just use a tool in order to solve problems. And we also cannot discount the idea of idea generation, being more creative. Now, back during the Renaissance era, a lot of these famous figures, they carry this thing called a commonplace book. Nowadays, it's called a digital second brain. But back then, they called it the commonplace book. And it's basically your life's work. You carried everything in it. You wrote down all your ideas, all your thinkings. Some of even the best tools by billionaires today is just simply having a pen and pad. Like, I think that's one of Richard Branson's number one tool he recommends for people. And I think one of Tim Ferriss's books I read. But just simply having a notepad whenever you have an idea or something like that, so you're on a walk or something like that, and just being able to jot down exactly the thought or idea or something you've had. You're bringing forth that's what's already in you onto something tangible. You're saving it for later, and you could just store it into your repository. Helps you solve the problem better, or like work through a way you are working through something in your courses or your professional life, whatever it may be. And it's really just to have this sort of idea journal, something you can always just track everything with. All the ideas, all the things you're getting in your mind, or just coming into like with all the inputs and stuff you're processing, having it somewhere, and then being able to reflect here and there, or just go back into this commonplace book and see if maybe perhaps in this new context, in this different time, or this different position you are in life, where if something that you wrote once upon a time actually makes sense now, where you can apply it now in this new case scenario. One great hack, I guess you can say, that I've learned on how to be more creative with your ideas is, like, let's say there's this habit, I forget who did it, but someone recommended a habit to write down 10 ideas every single day. And when you're doing that, you're just forcing yourself to be more creative, to solve problems a better way. And again, bringing forth that's already within you through like the power of your subconscious mind and through all the things that you've learned and you're actually processing with your conscious mind. So simply just writing every single day, morning, night, depends throughout the day, just 10 ideas every single day. And it'll be about anything. You're just getting in the habit of doing this. Now, if you're struggling to get 10 ideas every single day to be more productive, to solve problems, whatever it may be, then the contradictory advice would be to not lower how many ideas you are collecting or doing every single day, but rather increase it. Because when you increase it from 10 to 20 or something like that, you're training your brain not to be perfect, but instead just get it out there, to have something tangible and something to work with. Perfection isn't the solution. It's rather just the ability to produce the idea, because that is what we're trying to train ourselves on. And ultimately, like after just following this practice, more innovation, more creativity, this is what it all leads to. You're just producing more. You're applying that qualitative state that you can basically tune into. And how does journaling impact our emotional intelligence, our emotional well-being, our ability to manage stress? Well, here's the thing. This can also improve your productivity significantly, and here is how. When we're journaling and we are writing about the things we're thankful for, appreciative, or just being in a state of gratitude, what this is doing is it is releasing this neurotransmitter called oxytocin, and it's responsible for social connection, love, sexuality, things of that nature, basically human bonding. And what it ultimately does is promotes calmness, states of rest, decreases anxiety. Giving thanks is proven to make you happier. I was reading something about Harvard, and it was actually interesting because when it just makes you happier, think about it, you're changing your state. In my prior video, we talked about changing your state, and when you're in a different state, you can see things from a different perspective. Whereas if someone is in an angry state, in a sad state, or something like that, you're not prone to think from a rational state, or a state where you're more likely to solve problems and things of that nature. So when we're changing our state simply by being grateful in the morning or at night after you've had a long day, you are basically tuning into a state where you're more likely to be more productive, more efficient, and actually be more useful to the world. Whereas if you were in a negative state, like think about it, if you feel like crap right now, if you have a poor diet, if you maybe just got out of an argument or something like that, how likely are you to actually produce some good quality work? Odds are probably not. And when you're just doing these simple oxytocin releasing activities, I guess I like to call them that, gratitude is a powerful one because it just simply changes your state. And one way to do that effectively is through journaling, because again, you're putting something on paper, you're externalizing it, you're seeing it, and it's not just in your head, easily flying out the window. And then tying this into stress, it has a lot of similar ideas and concepts in terms of what we just talked about with gratitude and being able to journal, but same thing applies. When we are writing, it actually can be a very useful tool to de-stress while we are processing our emotions, our anxiety, anything going on in our heads. And of course, when you are less stressed, it leads to more focus, more productivity, more of an ability to produce and create for the world. And again, it's that idea of not always just being in our heads, but being able to put something down, put something outside ourselves, and to be able to create this sort of detachment from what's in us and putting it outside of us. And there's this thing where I read somewhere in a research paper, is that what journaling does is it creates this sort of cognitive diffusion. And it goes back to that whole thing I talked about a few minutes ago about Solomon's paradox. But what it is here where it makes sense scientifically, especially with your mind, is that when you are enabling this thing called cognitive diffusion, you are basically creating separation from your thoughts and all these things you are thinking to yourself. Maybe it's self-sabotage, whatever it may be. You're separating the problem from yourself and you're looking at it more objectively. And then you can face the problem more objectively, you can solve it, you can rationalize around it, and you can not form this sort of attachment or some sort of limiting belief around it to limit you in whatever way it is potentially even limiting you. But other than that, that was basically my thoughts and insights around journaling and how it can make you a productive beast, a productive machine, right? It really just has to do with the way we manage our internal states, with the stress, our emotional well-being, and then in terms of how we are problem solving with things, and then being creative around that. And finally as well, how it creates mental clarity and giving you an ability to process and achieve goals. So of course, I really appreciate so much if you've sticked all the way to the end watching this video. So shout out to you. Thank you for watching. And if you've gotten anything of value, I'd love to see you around. See you around in another video. Peace.